Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell do their combine pressers, and to me, the headline is that J.J. McCarthy is well on his way to taking this job. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. Today on the show, we've got a lot to go over. The combine rumor mill is starting to sort of uncover itself. And that starts with the combine pressers. Obviously, you're going to get some interesting quotes there, but also, the people have been in Indianapolis for a couple days now. People have been starting to talk. Reporters are starting to get some stuff. You've got a Jonathan Allen trade request now coming out of Washington because, and you're going to see, you notice that, the trade requests and, teams granting trade requests, that story keeps happening. That's because teams are talking to agents. Maybe they are not supposed to, or agents are talking to other teams and learning, hey, this is what I would give your player. This is what I would trade for your player. That information is getting back to teams. And so a team like the Washington Commanders likes what they hear enough to say, okay, let's, pursue and see what you can get out there. Is in this kind of very ballparky back alley way. It's what happens at the combine. But in a more official sense, guys went up to the podium, including Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo Mensah. And I'll be honest, you can skip it. Most of what was said, they were asked pretty point blank questions and they gave the non-answers that you would expect. What are you going to do with Sam? Oh, we have options. We're going to look at everything. They're very glad that they have, the option to re-sign him, the option to tag him, the option to let him walk. All of those things are available to them and they get to just select the one that they like the best. They're happy about that. I'm going to talk about that more because there was an Ian Rapaport hit on NFL Network on that kind of hit weird for me. And I'm going to play a little bit of Nancy Drew there. Okay. A little bit of read between the lines. But the big thing for J.J. McCarthy, this was a report from Ben Gessling and also was corroborated by the quotes. J.J. McCarthy's rehab is going well. It is going on schedule. It's the way it's supposed to be. And he is targeting the start of offseason activities in April. This is not OTAs. This is before OTAs even. But there are some offseason, not practices, but conditioning activities that are not mandatory or anything like that. And a lot of players will go do their own thing. But those April offseason activities are what J.J. McCarthy is targeting for getting back in, being complete with his rehab, and he's good to go. And he's back over 200 pounds. This is new to me. And I think I'm way slow on the uptake. And I think a lot of you knew this already, but I'm going to talk about it anyways because I like learning a new thing. But I didn't realize how much weight you lost when you rehabbed an injury. And so I posted on Blue Sky about that, and 3 different people were like, yeah, when I hurt my knee, I lost 30 pounds. The doctor told me to lose 20 pounds before the surgery if I could, blah, blah. And it totally makes sense to me, right? You put a little less weight on the joint, it's going to be easy to rehab the injury to that joint. But J.J. McCarthy at Michigan was listed at the combine, he weighed in at 220. And for the Vikings, he listed at 219. He played in Michigan. I think he played closer to about 200. So he bulked up for the NFL and then let that bulk go, and he's getting that bulk back. That's part of the rehab process, I would imagine, and that's a long-term thing. That's part of why this takes so long. But apparently that is completely normal. I didn't know about it, but I never even thought about what you would want to do with your weight for rehab. So that tracks to me, but I never thought about it before. But apparently that's a normal thing. My first thing was, oh, he's back over 200. What, did he get emaciated? He lost 30 pounds for rehab? But apparently the answer is yes, he did. And that's also a super normal thing to do. So, okay, sure. So that also, the report from Ben Gessling, again, correctly refers to it as a meniscus. Please trust local beats. I'm going to say this kind of every chance I get, just in case there's somebody listening to Locked On Vikings for the first time that thinks that J.J. McCarthy tore his ACL and got 2 surgeries on it. That's not what happened. J.J. McCarthy tore his meniscus. They opted for the full repair. There was a little swelling at some point in a rehab, so they did an arthroscopic procedure to look at the damage. They came away satisfied with what they saw, so that was it. There was no extra work done on that knee. They just put a scope in there, looked, and left, and gave him a quick injection for this. I think they drained the fluid or something like that, did a quick procedure for the swelling, and it didn't come back, so everything was good to go. His timeline remained unchanged. He was always if you just did the math from like when he got his meniscus surgery to like the normal timeline of events, being done by, March was a pretty realistic goal, and now he's looking at April. And so maybe that thing slowed him down like a few weeks, and that's about that. So it's nice to see that the injury right now, everything is going according to plan with it. And it's just a matter of, can he get the bulk back? Can he get his body back? And then he'll have the entire offseason program to get his mechanics back underway and to continue to learn that playbook and get his development underway, and then be able to hit training camp, ground running to compete against whatever quarterback he's going to be competing against. In terms of that, again, like Sam Darnold, both O'Connell and Kwesi were very cagey. Like, yeah, all our options are available. We don't know what we're going to do yet. We're still talking about it. So we'll see. And again, like what they learn at the combine might have a really big impact on this. And that kind of leads me to the next thing I was going to talk about, which is the rap sheet thing. We'll get there in a sec. But they were also asked about Daniel Jones and O'Connell in particular. Again, really cagey, was very like, yeah, we loved getting to know him, and then like said nothing else, like what does that mean you're going to do? Like very clearly didn't want to talk about that. He also went on Paul Allen's show, and that's a better conversation. Go listen to the Kevin O'Connell Talks 2024 season. It's up on the Minnesota Vikings YouTube channel, and I think it's up on their website too, where Paul Allen and Pete Bursich talked to him. That's a much better conversation. If you're just wondering about like how, like they really do a good job of getting O'Connell to kind of loosen up and talk candidly about like his experience becoming a head coach after winning the Super Bowl and having that like kind of whirlwind week, and that Kellen Moore went through it. And apparently O'Connell and Kellen Moore kind of had some conversations about that, which was a story over in Saints land where, they're saying like Kevin O'Connell like dispensed some wisdom about like, here's what it was like for me. I just find that interesting. I think that's an interesting and endearing conversation, but you're not going to get any news. And I think it's pretty rare to go to the combine pressers and get like a headline where somebody says, yeah, we're going to trade this guy. And it's like, that's the headline. Like you don't really get like a transaction wire item out of the combine very often. Cause everybody's being cagey and holding all their cards close to the chest. But as it stands, nothing has really changed. Daniel Jones, still very much an option. Sam Darnold, they're still working through whatever they want to do there. JJ McCarthy's going to be ready to challenge whoever it is, but it's going to be somebody. That's always been the way that it is. Elsewhere, O'Connell kind of walked back his comments about the interior line that happened like right after the season. A reporter asked him it was either the post-game presser or like the next day presser, like the kind of end of season presser, that, hey, like, do you feel you need to improve on the interior offensive line? And you're coming off a game where you just lost in the playoffs. You gave up 9 sacks. And he's like, oh, absolutely. Yeah, we got to be better. We got to be more physical, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of gave a very coachy answer, but he said absolutely to that. And it made everybody think, oh, so they're going to do stuff on the line. They're going to get rid of guys, right? We're going to replace Ingram, maybe even replace Brandel or Bradbury, maybe all three. Like people really got into that. So they followed up with that in the combine presser. And he said, somebody asked him like, so are you going to replace pieces? And he said, well, I don't know about the word replace. And then he kind of said, we have to be more physical. That doesn't necessarily mean replacing guys. That could mean somebody bulks up, is I think what he was getting at, right? That could mean you could replace Ed Ingram with an improved version of Ed Ingram because he had a good offseason. Like that is a potential path you could pursue. So he kind of walked that back. And again, this is the take that I have. And this is a very soft prediction, right? Wouldn't be surprised at all if I end up wrong here. But a prediction about free agency is that the Vikings don't go as hard on the interior O-line as a lot of people want. And I feel like we experience this about every season and at least every season that I've been covering the Vikings is everybody wants the interior O-line to get, rocketed to the moon and then replaced with the coolest names out on the market that year. And, everybody spends $60 million on the O-line because we're all just so sick of the O-line. And then they end up getting like maybe one name that you feel okay about, and then like a competition to your guy, and you're going to have a camp competition at left guard, and you're going to like roll into the season that way. And maybe like a rookie gets in there, and they do it piecemeal and like very slow. It's always slow. It's Tantalus, right? The water just goes away from your lips the second you bend down to drink it. And like it's never going to be what you want. So I guess this is me saying, like, don't get your hopes up for 3 new starters on the interior O-line. And people want that. People have given me people have sent me emails that are like, why don't we just do that? They're not going to do it. Why not? We can have that conversation about like resource management and stuff, but they're not. It's just not how it sounds like. That's not how they're going to operate. They're going to be a lot more conservative about that. But right now is a really interesting moment for reporting. And I'm going to go into the Rapaport thing that I've been teasing, plus some of the other combine rumors and stuff coming around the bend, as well as like the meetings. We're starting to learn who the Vikings are interested in and maybe what positions that means they could be looking at in the draft. So all that'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. So on NFL Network at the Combine, in their Combine coverage, Ian Rapaport was doing a segment on the Vikings and their whole deal, and it was weird. I feel like you can find it. Go watch it. You can find it on social media. You can look it up. It's Ian Rapaport on the Viking situation. And the substance of it was nothing new. It was, they're considering all options for Sam Darnold. They are so happy with what Darnold did. They won 14 games. They're so like pleased with that, but they also are thinking in the long term. And that's like a big thing that like another big headline that came out of all these interviews is they're saying, we're thinking short term and long term. And that's the thing. Like Darnold is not long term. Matt Stafford trade. That's not a long term idea. Daniel Jones is not a long term idea. All of those are short term. All of those are maybe they'll start week 1, 2025, but long-term it's JJ McCarthy. That's decided. They've been very candid about that. Like they've been very explicit about that. JJ McCarthy is the long-term quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. What they do in the short term and in the meantime, there's all kinds of options that they're weighing all that and we'll see. But long-term it is JJ McCarthy. No ifs, ands, or buts. But Ian Rapaport was like this gushing, like flowery, like thing, like treatise on the Vikings situation. Oh, how lovely they have it right now. They have Sam Darnold and they like him and they could keep him and they could tag him and they could, try to flip him. And it was like hinting really hard at a tag and trade for getting like maybe a comp pick plus, I think was the way he put it. That he mentioned like, you let him go, you get a comp pick and that like, that's the floor. And in a way, yeah, I think the only way you tag and trade Sam Darnold is if you hear that somebody's willing to give you more than what the compensatory pick would be, which call it a third rounder in 2026, assume that you navigate free agency such that you don't cancel that out. Can anybody do better than a 2026 third on a tag and trade? My hypothesis is no. I talked about that at length yesterday. But I don't think anybody does that. But that's kind of what it comes down to. Hey, and if everybody says, we give you like a 6, but not like that much, you go, okay, and you let them walk and you take your comp pick. So it's like, that's your floor, is that it's a comp pick. And that was the point Ian Rapaport was making. And what a great situation it is. But to me, he was hinting super hard at the idea of a tag and trade. And that is that feels like it comes directly from the mouth of Kwesi Adofo Mensah, texting Ian Rapaport saying, hey, go on TV and make it seem like we're open to a tag and trade. I want to see who calls. And this is the thing that happens this time of year, that the legit reporting, like the real, like above the line official names, the guys that go on TV, and we know you watch Hard Knocks offseason in the Giants and look at what they have on TV every time they cut to Joe Schoen's office. Like every time he's got NFL Network on and he's listening to that. So when Ian Rapaport goes on NFL Network and says that, he's talking to 31 NFL teams. And if that comes from the Vikings, and it sounded to me like that was the kind of thing that was the report that comes from sources inside the organization, right? So if it comes from that, that's everybody saying, hey, we're open to it. Or everybody hearing, hey, we're open to it. What do you think we can get? And see if teams call. It's an information gathering. And I think that that's a totally normal part of the process. This is the part where I think the Vikings are going to get news that they don't like, but it would be asinine of them not to go, grab that information. But whether or not my prediction about that comes true, it is fascinating to watch the media landscape right now and just how, I don't want to use the word corrupt, but like adulterated it is. You're not hearing intrepid Woodward and Bernstein reporting, guys going in and trying to get, bring the truth to light. You're hearing corporatized messages. You are hearing state-sponsored media here. And I often call it like state-sponsored media. This is like propaganda. This is the state news network that these guys are all going to say what their sources want them to say. And that's how they get their information. If you go out and you start saying stuff that you weren't given the blessing to report, you'll never get a scoop from that guy again. It's just how it works. And I don't think this is something anybody needs to do anything about. It's the way it is. And I think it's kind of on us as the consumer to understand that what we're hearing from Tom Pelissero, from Adam Schefter, from Ian Rapaport is straight from the horse's mouth. So it's not that hard of a logical leap to say, okay, straight from the horse's mouth, somebody told Ian Rapaport that, we've got all the options. We want these teams to turn on the TV and think about what Sam Darnold's going to get in a comp pick and see if anybody, and we want every single one of these teams to consider if they're going to do better than that. That's a pretty logical price to put on it. So I'm definitely filling in some blanks with just common sense, but it makes sense, doesn't it? And assuming that Sam Darnold gets the contract that, he's going to do that, that is based around the tag is the way that Ian Rapaport put it, which is, either the tag or an extension based around the tag, which is interesting. That puts a number on what the Vikings would extend him around. That would mean that it's like a $40 million annual value, which is higher than any of the projections are. So if it's based around the tag is 41. So if it's based around the tag, then, you're giving him 41 mil a year. That is higher. But Rapaport also kind of sold Darnold as the belle of the ball in free agency and even brought up you're not going to take, he's a better option than the corpse of Aaron Rodgers. He's a better option. He even said, maybe you could argue Matt Stafford, but Matt Stafford's old. So Sam Darnold's still the belle of the ball. And it was very clearly a sales pitch to say, hey, who is going to come and give us this beautiful present and maybe we can get some phone calls. I just don't know if anyone takes that bait, but the bait was definitely put out there. That's my sort of Nancy Drew read on the whole thing. I just never really take it at face value when you hear from these guys, any more than you take it at face value when you hear a guy talk at the podium, right? You kind of have to decide for yourself, hey, is this a time where this guy is telling you really how it is, or is this guy telling you what he wants you to think how it is? And in the case of these combine reports, this is the time of year where everybody wants to really specifically curate what they the image that they present to where their franchise is at in certain things. There's nothing really wrong with that to me. And if there's nothing anybody can really do about it outside of getting, some weird leaky political reporters to start using their talents to leak stuff out of sports teams. But these sports teams are they're not going to cooperate with that. It's just not the culture of the NFL. So here we are. We have to kind of do this mind ready thing. But all that is to say, a lot of what we already knew. But here is the process going on. And it's so fun to watch this process moment by moment where, okay, now here's the part where today and tomorrow is where Kwesi waits by the phone. And what are we going to get? And that information is going to help them make their decision on Sam Darnold. And then, hopefully we'll learn about that. The tag deadline is March 4th. So they've still got a week to deal with it, to figure it out. But if that date passes and there's no tag, then we can probably pencil in Sam Darnold as a pending free agent and kiss him goodbye and say thanks for the year. But there's other stuff that went down at the combine, that's going down at the combine, rumors, trade stuff, draft meetings, all of that. So we'll do a little more miscellaneous stuff next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. FanDuel is the best place to bet on the NBA. Whether you are putting together a crazy same-game parlay, sitting back, watching it and seeing if all your legs hit, or if you missed tip-off, but you had a really good bet idea, well, you can do the same thing probably as a live bet. And whether you're like waiting till halftime and doing a fourth quarter comeback and trying to like actually ride the momentum of the game like a lot of people do, or if you just like barely missed the tip off and all the bets closed, but the live bets are still there, you can find it all at at FanDuel's live betting app. It keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether you're backing your team for a late rally, picking a player to hit some clutch three, you never miss your chance. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Moving right along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Now, we've got a couple of names on the list for like combine meetings. The big one is Ashton Junty. And all the buzz around the Vikings is that it's running backs and D tackles. So here's the thing. These running back classes, D tackle class, this is where I'm focusing most of my energy to, at least in the early part of the draft process. These guys are these classes are all supposed to be really deep. And for what I've seen, now, like a lot of the top guys I haven't even looked at here. Like I haven't looked really seriously at Walter Nolan or Mason Graham or Howard, the Oregon guy, or Harmon, Derek Harmon, the Oregon guy. But like the top end is like incomplete to me, but I'm finding when I watch these D tackles, I find myself lower on them than consensus. I don't know if this is necessarily going to be the class everybody says it's going to be, but incomplete grade, so don't take that to the bank or anything. That's just like kind of early return for me. But the running backs, that's even more extreme to me. And I have gone through, I think, most of the top names in the running back class, and I haven't seen a guy that's like clear first rounder to me yet. Now my running back thing is still very much like I think you got to be a game changer to be a first round worthy running back. Like you got to be Saquon, you got to be like this, like changes the world. And I didn't see that with Junty. I saw a good running back. I saw an NFL starter for sure, but I don't know if he changes the world. But once you get to the 20s, it gets a little bit easier to say, yeah, well, if you would have taken him at 32, but not at 29, like we're splitting hairs, right? So either way, when you get a combine interview, we often try to take a little bit more away from it than I think we can. A combine interview is gathering more information. That's all a combine is gathering information. And gathering information means that you're considering certain ideas, but it doesn't mean that you're about to make decisions on them. It means you need more info before you can. So when they do a combine interview with Ashton Junty, when they do, an interview with 60 tackles and 6 running backs and a wide receiver and a guy, looking at those names, sometimes those are guys with off field or guys with an injury or guys with, an interesting, like, why did you play it this way? Kind of like they played something differently than usual and you want to ask them about it. It's not like a short list of here's all our favorite guys. Let's talk to them all at the combine. That's not what the combine is for. And you often see, priority free agents coming in for interviews at the combine that like end up going totally undrafted and not because of their combine interviews. Like it's just guys that you want to learn more about so that you can finalize your grade on them. That said, I think the combine interviews do predict like the Vikings draft picks. It's hard. They definitely did with Spielman. We don't quite have enough of a sample with Kwesi to have like good math on this, but if you are brought in for a combine interview, like you are more likely to be the pick for that team, just like generally, like there is, a correlation there, but it's not necessarily a full thing. So I kind of fell into the trap here that I'm going to tell you not to worry about, but the fact that they're bringing in Ashton Junty doesn't mean they're going to draft him at 24. It just means that they want to know more about him before they make a determination about if they're going to put him that high on their board. And so we don't need to go like, oh my God, they're meeting with this guy, they're going to do the first round running back thing, and then start discoursing about how much we like it or not. But there is which I did, so my bad. So let me change the subject to save face. Because there's a rumor that came out of the combine that's really intriguing to me. And I don't usually get into the, hot name is out there, let's go. But so the Washington Commanders have granted Jonathan Allen permission to seek a trade. And we talked about this a little bit on Locked On NFL. So go listen to Locked On NFL with me and Tyler, with David Harrison, who does Locked On Commanders, had a little bit of a ditty on it. And Tyler is at the combine with David. They're both in Indianapolis right now. And they were talking about it off air. And David Harrison basically said, like, this guy's not going for a first. This guy's not going for a this is like a day 3 pick. And the dynamic there makes a lot of sense. So to talk really quickly about the Commander situation, they have a Jared Allen, Everson Griffin situation going on right now, where they've got a guy that's been the guy for a long time in Jonathan Allen, and then they've got this like second year Jerjon Newton dude that they're really excited about. So my read on the thing is they've got Daron Payne, they've got Newton next to him, and they're going to roll with that. And Jonathan Allen has become a redundant piece. He's over 30. He's coming off some injuries. He's got a $15 million cap hit that has no guarantees on it, and he wants to renegotiate that. All of the perfect seeds for just trade this guy to some other team and go get a fresh start, right? And I think not only could the Vikings be smart to be that team, I would love that, because I think Jonathan Allen's still a good enough player. But this is so Kwesi. This is absolutely the kind of thing that Kwesi would do. I try to resist the hype trains of those, but this is one I'm actually pretty into. It's out of character for me. And the reason is, like, for one, I just still believe that he is a good player, right? Like, I just think that Jonathan Allen can make things happen for you up front in a way that the Vikings don't really have those guys. And I think it would immediately remove the interior D-line need. Like, with Jonathan Allen on that team, I am good with Harrison Phillips, and bring back Jonathan Bullard. That's a group that I'm like happy with, and we never have to spend another asset on it. But the price is going to be right. For one, he's at $15 million, not guaranteed. He's probably going to want to renegotiate that contract a little bit, but you're not paying this dude $30 million a year or anything like that. Like, the money's going to be fine. And because you're going to take so much of that money off the Commanders' books, they're going to do this for a 5. Like, I think you can send one of the 5ths over there and get Jonathan Allen. And I think that's about as best as the privilege of paying Jonathan Allen $15 million plus whatever else you renegotiate it to is absolutely going to do more for your team than the 5th round pick that's going to get you like a special teamer. Absolutely. So I'm very into that. I think a lot of teams are going to be very into that, and you're going to have something of a bidding war. Maybe it pumps it up to a 4 or something like that. Or maybe the Vikings have to do like a 3 for a 4 once they get their comp pick from Kirk Cousins. But either way, that it makes a lot of sense for the Vikings to do that. And it could be, I think it's one of the more efficient opportunities for them to. But the thing about a bidding war, and I'll end you with this, as we get into free agency as well, keep this in mind. The thing about a bidding war is only one team gets to do it. And losing a bidding war doesn't mean you played it wrong. It means you had your limits. I remember, a lot of people being mad at the Vikings for not getting Trey Lance for a 4th when he went to the Cowboys. That was a disaster for the Cowboys. I'm not going to try to take a victory lap about how I was right about that, even though I was. But more to say that the rumor at the time was that everybody was offering like sixth rounders, and then the Cowboys came in with a 4th. So it's not that the Vikings failed. People wanted to like fire Kwesi over this. It was ridiculous. But it's not that the Vikings failed. It's that they made a decision not to go that high. They went, that's too rich for my blood. They pulled out of the auction. And that is a responsible thing that's perfectly defensible to do, whatever your limit is, whatever you decided that it is. So while I'm sitting here saying, oh my God, get in on the Jonathan Allen thing, I would love to hear that they were in on it. But if another team comes in and says, like, we'll give you a second, and the Vikings are like too rich for my blood, I'd be a little bummed, but I would absolutely respect that. And it's the same thing with free agents. They're going to be in on a lot of free agents. You're going to hear a lot of names over the next few weeks. And especially once tampering begins in actual free agency, you're going to hear Vikings in on this guy, Vikings offered this, Vikings blah, blah, blah. You're going to hear a ton of it. But the key here is the bidding wars that they lose are going to vastly outnumber the bidding wars that they win. You get in, you mud at the wall this, right? You get in on 20 of these for every one you actually end up signing. That doesn't mean you're bad at bidding wars. It just means that you're feeling it out and playing the numbers game and then pulling out when things get a little bit too steep for you. And that way, you're only making deals that you're really, really, really excited about. To go back to the pressers, Kwesi answered a question about his successful free agency, and he talked a lot about the process and the meetings and the plan that they had going in, that they knew they were going to go after Christian Wilkins, and if they didn't get Christian Wilkins, they're going to get Jonathan Grenard and Van Ginkel, and they're going to do it this way. That turned out to be great. It worked for them. And having those contingencies, we're going to go after this guy, but if we don't get him, here's another plan we feel good about. Having that. And I think that's why, the pro scouting part of Kwesi's tenure has gone so well. I think they've been really good at making that plan, and maybe not so much with the drafts, although the jury is still way too out on too many of those drafts. And people say, like, declaring Kwesi's a bad drafter are really responding to the first 2 draft picks he ever made, which is pretty unfair. And I hate it, but I've complained about that enough on this show. I'll talk to you all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.